Hi, I am Merav Oren, and I'm happy to host you on my podcast, What's Your FOODIsh, where I meet the most interesting people to talk about their home, their childhood, their family, and memories from the dinner table. And today in this new episode, I'm so happy and excited to host Rob Eshman. Rob is a food writer, editor, teacher, and activist. He served as the national editor and food editor of The Forward, where he is now a senior contributing columnist, and developed and oversaw award-winning food coverage as editor-in-chief and publisher of the Jewish Journal. Rob created and runs the blog Foodism, named one of LA's best blogs, and is writing a book by the same name. Rob created and taught the popular course Food, Culture, and Media at the USC Annenberg School of Communication, and he serves on the advisory board of Canvas, focusing on supporting Jewish arts and food culture, and of course, he serves on our board of FOODISH. As the current CEO of A-Mark Foundation, he invests in research and research-based solutions to social problems, including climate change, food justice, and hunger. So Rob, I'm very excited and proud to have you as my guest today. And yalla, let's start.
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here.
So I'm very excited it's finally happening. So let's start. Yeah, took us a while. So let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? Like a few words about your family, parents, brothers, sisters, grandparents. Where are they from?
So I grew up in Encino in the San Fernando Valley, which is not the old country, but maybe old country adjacent. My grandparents were actually mostly, almost all of them were from America, were born in America. So they, but they really retained obviously the roots, the flavors of the old country that came from, their parents came from Poland and Russia, that area. One side of my family came from Pinsk and one side came from Minsk. And it's weird. And my great grandfather on my father's side actually owned a delicatessen in Chicago called New York Delicatessen. And I actually have the business card for that blown up to the size of a big poster on my wall in my kitchen. It says New York Delicatessen. Its motto was try once, which is kind of a good motto for life, right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, I guess, food. And, I was very proud of that growing up, that, I had this deli in my background. And it was evidently a fantastically failed business. Never got off the ground, but I could relate to it. So I grew up with a lot of Jewish food, from Ashkenazic Jewish food, and I always think, like, my grandparents didn't have accents, but they spoke, they knew Yiddish. And I just wonder what's lost when, the next generation, the generation after that, when there's not even that connection. We often talk about, what's going to happen when the Holocaust survivors all die. But it just in general, when that whole generation, when that connection to that older generation is no longer present. And it's just, I don't know how that changes things, but it definitely changes things for people.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have brothers, sisters?
A brother and a sister. My brother lives partly here and partly in Idaho, and my sister is a veterinarian, and she lives up in the Bay Area. And my parents are 96 and 93 and still very much alive and active. And we went out with them to see a play a couple nights ago, and they're just unstoppable, and they have great appetite. Yeah.
So what does the word home mean to you?
It's we had this dinner table we've lived in our house for 28 years, and we had the same dinner table. And just this past weekend, we bought a new one because the old one was it had stains and it just wasn't looking good. It needed to be replaced. So we moved that dinner table over to another part, just away, and we brought in this new table. And I didn't expect it to hit me so emotionally. And I told my wife, Naomi, I said, I'm having a really hard time saying goodbye to that dinner table. And I just realized, how many hours and memories and moments and meals were around that table. And there's nothing special about it. It's just a very functional table that I bought, for a few $100s off a used, back when they had newspaper ads for used furniture. So there's nothing precious about it except for the memories. And so I guess, home is the dinner table. And I think that, or the table that you eat at. And I remember wherever we've traveled, and I think people could relate to this, wherever you live, wherever you travel, even if there's no furniture, you kind of sit on the floor and create a table. And I think that's home for me.
That's so beautiful. Well, I was about to ask how was your connection to food growing up, which I kind of understand now. But what is your earliest memory of food and home? I mean, is it from your grandparents' home, from the deli, from where did it all start for you?
Yeah, my earliest memory is really trying to make my own food. I was obsessed with these things called Pop Tarts. Do they have those in Israel?
Pop Tarts? Not that I
Pop
know of,
Tarts.
but maybe I'm not sure I understand what it is.
So a Pop Tart is like a little hand pie, like a pastry that has jam inside or jelly inside, and
Yeah.
in your toaster. And what do they call those? I've never seen them in Israel, but I'm assuming they have them there, whatever they call them.
If I understand correctly, it's just like small pies with jam inside.
Yeah, but they're enclosed, so you put them in your toaster and you push down the
Ah,
toaster. They
no, no,
warm
no.
up in the toaster and then pop up when they're done.
No,
And
no, no,
then
no. So I don't know.
anyway,
I don't think we have those.
well, I think that is going to support Foodish, is importing or making Pop Tarts into
So
Israel.
you make them? You know how to make them?
Well, that's the thing. I was upset. They are the most, kind of the standard junk food for American childhoods. And I was obsessed with them, and so I decided I would make them myself. And I have a memory of standing at our kitchen counter. I don't even know. I think I had a Betty Crocker cookbook with a pie dough recipe in it, and so I made the pie dough, and then I figured all you had to do is put some jam in it, and then cover it up, and then put it in the toaster. So just think of what happens when you take raw pie dough with jam inside and stick it in the toaster. It
I'm not sure I wanted to imagine.
was just telling you
Is
the
this
disaster.
toaster? Did the toaster go to the trash after that?
Well, I mean, of course, I should never have been allowed in a kitchen after that. And that was my first cooking experience. But just the thought that I was so obsessed then with kind of trying to recreate this food that I loved, and that's never changed for me. If I eat, whatever I eat or whatever food I love, whether it's pickle or goat cheese or whatever it is, I try to make it myself, or I do make it myself, without the
Yeah.
disaster. I learned, my second big food memory is I was maybe 9 years old, and my great aunt was over, and I told her I wanted to learn how to make pizza. And so we stood at the counter, and I don't remember where we got the bread dough, but we made pizza together. So, those are my early memories, trying to kind of create the foods that I like to eat, but starting from scratch.
And any special memories of traditions from holidays? You making the food or not you? Whoever around you? Special dishes?
Well, we
Did you ever make
celebrated,
repelach?
yeah, we celebrated the big holidays, and my mother was always cooking for the big, Passover, Hanukkah, the major kind of the American Jewish holidays. And I just have really warm memories, and my mother, who's still alive, is a good cook, but she's even a better entertainer. And I learned, my father just has a great appetite. He doesn't cook and he loves food. But my mother really loves to entertain. And my parents are very social. And so I grew up kind of learning how to entertain, not just how to cook. And I think that's something that even a lot of cooks I know, even a lot of great cooks I know, don't know how to kind of be relaxed and comfortable and have people over and make it easy and fun and my mother just does that perfectly. And I think, just the memory of growing up in suburbia in the 70s, the sounds of drinks clinking and ice cubes clinking in glasses and people happy and having hors d'oeuvres and then having dinner and hanging out for coffee afterwards and just that whole pacing. And I think that's also, I don't know if it's part of cooking, but it's definitely something you need to learn and something that you have to get good at if you really want to enjoy the food that you cook. And my mother really taught me that, and Jewish holidays taught me that.
I can totally relate to that. I mean, I'm not really a good cook, but I love entertaining and all the holidays and everything. I think it's really a big part of celebrating the holiday, even more than the
Yeah,
food itself.
and entertaining is not something that you kind of know how to do. You kind of have to learn how to do it, right? I mean, it's not a natural thing, like how to make people, like, you get a drink in people's hands very quickly, whether they drink or not, whether it's alcoholic or not. You get people relaxed and happy, and you get food in there. And so just that, what to do when people come to your house or people come into your apartment. And I think it's not something that people necessarily know intuitively. So, I really am grateful for my parents for teaching me that.
You say that if you have faith, food can deepen and heighten your experience of community, tradition, and even God. Do you have an example of when food helped deepen or heighten your connection to your community, tradition, and of course to your Judaism?
I have so many, but I think the single word answer is Shabbat. I grew up, like I said, we celebrated the big holidays. And it wasn't really and then I lived in Israel for a couple of years. So I started, and I had many friends who were Shomer Shabbat, or, Shabbat is a thing in Israel.
When did you
That
live
was
here?
in the 84 to 86.
Then why? Why'd you come here?
I wanted to. I don't know where it got into me. I was living in San Francisco. I was working as a baker at Il Fornaio. And I was catering and baking, and I wanted to write, and I just thought I could do something interesting in Israel. There was no programs. Nobody was paying us. There was no birthright. I just got a plane ticket to Israel, went into an ulpan, got involved with some people I met there, learned Hebrew, worked as a counselor for Beit HaGalgalim, which is this wonderful organization.
Oh, I know. We just did an event with them. They're amazing people. Yes.
They are the
Were you
best
there when
people.
they were in Herzliya?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was my Israeli education, was meeting the best people in the world
Just for our
who.
listeners that do not know what Beta Galgalim is, do you want to say a word about who they are? Because it's really a special project.
Sure. So Beit HaGalgalim does social programs social programs and educational programs for children with mostly physical disabilities. And I think their mission may have expanded since I was there, because I was there in the early days. But they, hundreds or thousands of children and young adults go through their program, and they do. I mean, it really chokes me up. They change people's lives. And Israel is a country where it's, you could be left behind if you're not fit and macho or perfect or whatever. And these are kids who have a lot of different issues, and they spend Shabbats with them, and they do activities with them. Um, it's really transformative.
Yeah,
So,
it's amazing. And they still do it. And also, they have a new home in Jerusalem, I mean, the mountains around Jerusalem. We just did a meal with them to raise money for them. And they're a special,
oh, you
special
did?
NGO. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing people.
Um, they are, and so the people that work there are, you know, obviously very special, because they're donating their time and their energies to help these kids. And so I met wonderful people. I learned Hebrew because, the kids didn't speak English. And so if they needed something, if they needed a diaper changed at 3 a.m. and they're calling to you in Hebrew, you have to know what to do. So it was really an amazing experience. And then obviously my mind was blown by the food. I mean, I had been to Israel once before in my life, and I was 12, and I really enjoyed the food. But then when I got there as a young adult, and just, this was before Israeli food or Middle Eastern food. Arabic food was a huge thing. And suddenly to be exposed to to all the wonderful food there was just mind blowing. In fact, I wrote about it, which is it's a piece up on the Forward website now, or it's going up this week on going into Machne Yehuda and meeting the schug man, the man who sat on the corner on his heels and sold little containers, little Dixie cups, and he would fill them with either schug or hilba that he would make back at his house and bring them. This Yemenite man with a beard, and just I'd never tasted anything like that before. So for so many young American Jews, Israel was a big awakening, but especially when it came to food.
Yeah, I know. As a matter of fact, this is exactly what we're doing here at FOODISH, because FOODISH is about food, of course, but it's about connecting to your Jewish identity and to your Jewish culture through food. Like, food is our platform. It's what helps us deal with our Jewish identity. Right.
And so you'd asked me before about how it, food helped deepen or heighten my connection to community, tradition, Judaism. And I think really it was experiencing Shabbat, because, you had this, my connections came during the Jewish holidays, which were, 2 or 3 times a year. But suddenly, both in Israel and then later when I got married, my wife's a rabbi, and we would start doing Shabbat. And that changed everything. I mean, the idea that you could have that connection to your tradition, to your faith, and to food every week in a very special way, with friends coming over and guests. I mean, it's such a powerful thing. I mean, I'm really pro Shabbat, and I'm not Shomer Shabbat, but that Friday night dinner really, for me, that became the center of my faith and my religion.
I can again relate to that. I mean, there's something about the Shabbat dinner. We're not in my house. We're not religious, and we don't keep the Shabbat. But there's something about the Shabbat dinner. Everybody around the table. It's like, I don't know how to say it in words even, but it's like a restart of the weekend. Everything's
it's taking a deep
into
breath.
The atmosphere.
Yeah, and it's also like taking a deep breath, but also like you're given a chance to celebrate every week. And to me, it's like, it's a structure. It's structured like you're kind of supposed to do it. You have to do it. But I mean, you have to celebrate. You have to pause. You have to eat well. You have to, have some wine. And it's just, otherwise one day bleeds into the next. And I think that's been such a powerful learning experience for me, that you could kind of pull yourself out of the daily grind, and then foods roll in that, because the food you cook on Shabbat and just the practice of cooking for Shabbat just takes you into a different space.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not a good cook, but there's something about Shabbat afternoon here, having a glass of wine and cooking the Shabbat dinner, that, as you said, It's like something else in the air.
Oh, in Israel, it was like really in the air, like 1 p.m. But I also noticed, as I lived there and as I've been back many times, that Shabbat keeps coming earlier and earlier on Friday.
Yeah. From politics to the war in Ukraine and what makes the best hummus, your writing covers a large variety of subjects. What is your favorite subject to write about, and why?
Oh, I bet you could guess. I mean, and it's just because of what you said, Merav. It's just that it encompasses everything. I could write about politics by writing about food. I could write about social justice by writing about food. I taught this class at USC called Food, Media, and Culture. And the first day of class, I had like 40 students in the class from all different, journalism, business, engineering, all different parts of the college. And how they say, to make sure you're in the right class. I said, well, I just want to make sure you're in the right class. How many of you eat? And they all look and they laugh and they all raise their hand. I said, okay, so you're in the right class. I mean, it's something that just, there's nothing that we have more in common. Nothing. And so by, people pay attention when you write about food, and then you could talk about anything else you want while you're writing about food. So, I love it. I also find it very challenging. I had I had the best food writers in the world come to my class and talk about it. And they talk about, like Jonathan Gold, and they talk about the struggles of, trying to describe a meal or food in a way that's different and fresh and new, and that is tough. But I still, it's what I do love to write about the most.
So having said all that, who would you most like to have dinner with, and why, of course?
One thought that came to mind is the board of Foodish. Like we're on
Oh my
the
God,
Zoom.
I do agree with you so much. If we can have all of them together one day.
Could you imagine? I mean, Claudia
But you got to say
Ordan.
the names, yeah, so people understand who we're talking about. It's like crazy.
I mean, I'm on this Zoom with you, and it's Claudia Ordan in one square, and Joan Nathan, and oh my God, you have to help me now. Silvia Nakamoli, the Italian food writer,
Yeah, and
and
Helena, and Asaf Granit, and
yeah,
Jay Cohen, and
Jake
yeah, from all
Cohen.
over the world. Yes, Alana Newhouse and Patty
Yeah.
Ginn.
And it's like, wow, this would be a much more fun dinner party than a Zoom, wouldn't it?
Can I be in that dinner as well?
Well, you're on the Zoom, yeah. Everybody in that Zoom.
Yeah, I think I need to organize it, huh?
I think we really do.
Yeah, we
So
will. We
that's
will.
one dream. And then, you know, the one of the regrets I have is that when I taught this class at USC, I had a lot of great people come and speak to the class, either in person or over we didn't have Zoom then, but whatever we had, the computer system. And I never invited Anthony Bourdain. And I don't know why. I was a little shy, I think. Or I thought, no, he'll never want to talk to a class. But then, of course, I know since then I've known people who knew him well and said he would have loved to have taught. So I really do. The longer he's gone, the more I miss him. I think he really was the last great food thinker, voice writer in this country. So I'd love to have dinner with him. And then I mentioned my great grandparents who ran the deli. I'd love to have him with them and just talk to them about food.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've been doing this podcast in Hebrew and English. In Hebrew, I think I've done like around 15 chapters, and in English, a few more. And everybody at the end says, I would really, really, really love to cook or to eat with my grandparents. So,
yeah.
And speaking of that, who would you like to cook to, like a comfort food? And what would that be? What kind of food would you make?
What would I make?
And to who?
I like to cook food from beginning to end. So I like to make pickles from the start. I like to make bread from the scratch. I like to make desserts from scratch. And
So you're a patient person. If you like to make pickles and everything takes time.
Yeah, I think that's such a good way to put it. It's like I like to let time work for me instead of against me. We tend to like be fighting time all the time and racing. And when you cook sourdough or when you make pickles or kombucha or whatever, then time's your friend.
Yeah.
And and time becomes another ingredient in the food. And it just, I also like to cook things from my garden. So when people ask me this question, it's like whatever's in the garden at the time. And right now we have 70 artichoke plants on our property. We don't have a big property, but I just ripped out the lawn and put in artichokes. And we had these huge rains in LA. And so these artichoke plants are like prehistoric. It's like the Jurassic Park of artichoke plants. And we have literally,
you have chickens also, right?
I did have chickens. We had to get rid of them because they really are not great for allergies and asthma and stuff like that. But we had 5 chickens, and I've had chickens since before we were married. We started having chickens, and we had 2 goats in their property in Venice, which if you know LA at all, Venice is like in the center of the city. It's like in the country. And we have great neighbors who one of them grew up on a farm in southern France. So he loved having the goats next to him. But the whole thing with the hay, and then the goats would get out and destroy my garden. And so we gave the goats to a Jewish camp where they became really popular with the kids. So I like cooking from the garden. So right now I'm making everything with artichokes, and we've been eating artichoke puree with Parmesan and a little pasta water, and then you blend it into the pasta. It's like my favorite food these days.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'd eat it
And
now.
yeah, and then sometimes I'll parboil the artichokes and then cut them in half and toss them with olive oil and herbs from the garden and roast them in the oven till they're kind of like, to me, that's like the closest to eating. I eat shellfish outside the house. My wife doesn't eat it. She's kosher everywhere. But I told her this is the closest experience to kind of eating crab, where you're like picking through everything to find the meat, and it's crispy and soft. And so, and then we have fava beans. So I like taking the fava beans in the shell and just throwing them in the oven and roasting them, and then picking them apart hot on the table and eating the insides with salt. So I like cooking like that, just things from the garden. And then something great for dessert. Again, I have a lot of fruit trees, a lot of citrus trees. So, um, you know what I like? I like malabi. You know that milk
Malabi,
dessert.
yeah, in here, yeah, of course.
So I make it from almond milk or oat milk because again we're kosher, so we have parve desserts usually, and I'll serve it with some candied fruit from the garden. I like that. I just like serving people things that come from either the process of making it is longer, or it's coming from, from our house.
Yeah. Just a word about the artichokes. I was just in New York now and I met Barbara Kirschenblatt, which we did not mention as part of our board, which
Right.
is
God.
the woman. Yeah. And we ate the best grilled artichoke in the oven, like you said. So it just reminded me of that.
This was at a restaurant, or she made them?
No, it was in a restaurant, but it was amazing. So just like when you spoke about it, I just felt like I was eating it right now.
Oh.
What's your foodish, your favorite Jewish food dish?
Well, I know it's really controversial, especially if you go to Reddit or Twitter, but it would be hummus. And I know it's not a Jewish food dish. I know Jews didn't necessarily invent it. I know all that stuff. But when I associate, when I think of, going to Israel as a young person, and then having hummus, which was not Jewish, my favorite hummus by far is at Hummus Arafat, of all things, at in the Old City. I think it's near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Don't know it.
There's a little shop. You could find it online um, and then find the address. But it's called Hummus Arafat, and it's just a little hole in the wall, and they make it right there, and it is. That's just my joy and my comfort food. So when I'm in Israel, I try to go there. And now, so I love that. And then, what else I love is on Schenken, there was something I was turned on to in Israel that really you can't get outside of Israel are those bagela that are like they make cheese toast out of it.
Yeah.
Cheese inside the bagela, and then those round sesame bagels, and then, the large, flat, round sesame bagels, and they put like white or yellow cheese and then green olives in them, and then they press it and bake and grill it.
Yep. It's like the basic street food here.
Yeah, basic street food. So I love borscht. I love all that stuff, but really, it's the food I eat most commonly is probably hummus. Do you think of that as Jewish food?
As a matter of fact, no. Hummus for me is like you said, and even the name Hummus Arafat, because but I always say that saying what is Jewish food is like saying who is Jew, because you never, you don't get out of it. I mean, in a way, Jewish food for me is everything people brought from their home, what they grew up on. So if this is what you grew up on and this is what makes you connect to your Jewish identity, that's fine with me, because for you, it reminds of Israel, and Israel reminds you of your Jewish identity. So I'm not looking at Jewish food as a, like an academic kind of what is Jewish food. It's whatever you feel is for you, your favorite Jewish food.
You said that so well, and I think it's exactly that. It's what ties you to your memories, which ties you to your identity, and perfectly aware that hummus has roots and origins that are maybe nothing to do with Jews. Maybe Jews got involved at some point. They certainly got involved in the marketing of that. We know that.
You know that if you'll investigate the challah, it did not come from Jewish
Absolutely
roots as
not.
well. So we're never going to get out of it. I mean,
as far as I know, the only truly Jewish food that they could trace to Jews is matzah. And that's nothing to be so proud of. I mean, really, you're right. Challah is not Jewish. It's, there's if you go through Eastern Europe, there's tons of breads like challah. And babka certainly isn't Jewish. Rugula, so
yeah.
So matzah and matzah balls are probably because of the strictures for the holiday. Jews came up with that.
Yeah, of course, a lot of the Jewish dishes, foods, whatever, are because of the kosher restrictions, like from the chamin or the chum, that because you cannot cook, you cannot light electricity in the weekend. So long time ago, they had like this, they put the pot in the central...
Right, in the central oven.
Had like the central oven of the village.
Right.
And this is how they cooked it for 24 hours, and they did not need to use electricity. So a lot of the Jewish food started from that. But for us today, dealing with Jewish food here in Foodish, as I said, whatever you decide for yourself that is your dish from home, this is what counts for me. This is how I look at it.
And I like how you compare it to people's sense of their own Jewish identity. Like however you define yourself as a Jew is how you define yourself as a Jew.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we finish, I have a quick questionnaire for you. It's like 8 questions, like a yes or no ones, but it's not yes or no. Okay. You'll understand. I did not send them to you before because I did not want you to think about them. So just try and shoot.
Sure.
So, coriander or parsley?
Oh, coriander. It's a major point of contention in our house, but I'm a huge. I was talking about schug and I just love that flavor.
Yeah, it's usually people either love it or hate it. I hate it, but a lot of people really love it.
I mean, it's genetic. They know it. I mean, Julia Child, who certainly had great taste, she hated it. She thought it was like the devil's weed. She hated it.
Yeah. Sweet or spicy?
Spicy. I'm older now, and I've just lost my sweet tooth. Except for ice cream.
Salad or steak?
Salad. I find steak very repetitious. You just eat like one bite, and that's good. You got the idea, and then you're supposed to eat more of it. But it's like one bite is not that different from the next. And salad, it's like I don't know. I'm much prefer.
Me too. Sharing or individual dishes?
Well, even when Jews eat, even if it's individual, you end up sharing. I had lunch a couple of days ago. It was a work meeting with a work dinner with 2 people who are like colleagues. They're not friends. And we all ordered our individual plates. We were at a Persian restaurant called Shamshiri in Westwood, which is fantastic. And I'd never had dinner with this man before in my life. And we just shared off each other's plates. It's a very Jewish thing.
Yeah. Breakfast or dinner?
Dinner. I just have coffee and breakfast.
Over the counter or at the table?
Like I said, the table is where all the good memories happen.
Start with the meal with salads or soup?
Depending on the weather, but I love both. But I think soup is really, I find that soup is just really great and comforting. And again, it's a great way to use up some of the used vegetables in the garden. So, and then in summer, I love cold soup. So, cold borscht or, I like soup.
And our last one, challah or sourdough?
Sourdough. That's an easy one.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd like that first bite of challah and the whole that specialness of it. Yeah. But, just on a daily basis, like my regular bread or what I'd rather have is a piece of sourdough with avocado, or I'm much more of a sourdough person. Well,
Rob, thank you. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I mean, it was really interesting and fascinating. Great. I really enjoyed every moment. And a big thank you to our listeners for being with us and join us for the next episodes of What's Your Foodish? It's going to be fun.